Welcome to the Hope Champions podcast with Project Harmony. I'm Hailey.
I'm Scott.
And I'm John.
Join us as we explore the science of hope and its profound impact on healing trauma, right here on the Hope Champions podcast. Welcome to Hope Champions podcast. I'm Hailey.
I'm Scott.
And I'm John.
And today is our last episode of the season.
So
Woohoo.
sad.
Oh.
Woohoo.
Conflicting.
So sad.
No.
There's always next year.
Yes.
There's always next season.
Yes.
Yeah, I was not next year. Hopefully
Next season.
sooner than
Next
next year.
season.
Yes.
So one of the things that we sometimes hear as we're out training and talking about hope is that people just really want coaching around it, right? People understand it when we talk about it. And then I oftentimes hear, well, when in the training it made so much sense, but now that I'm back in my office or now I'm back in my role, I don't know how to do it. So I would love for our listeners to learn from somebody who's been doing this work for a long time.
Well, I have just the person for you, Scott. Today I talked to JerLene Mosely of Mosely Consulting. She is a life coach. She works with lots of different kinds of people, teachers, school administrations, individuals, businesses, but she also worked with GALLUP for many years and has really interesting insight on how students build hope and how to identify how we build hope. And she gives a lot of really cool examples of how we can practice hope ourselves. And JerLene just has a very infectious, wonderful energy about her.
Energy like no one else.
Yes, so much energy. Amazing. So I'm really excited for you guys to hear this episode. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. We're super excited to talk about hope, and I've been told that you have a ton of experience with hope.
My pleasure, Hailey. Thank you. Yes, I have spent over 35 years thinking about hope and possibilities in young people. And so I had a chance to have a long career at GALLUP, focusing on strengths and hope. After I started my educator career teaching instrumental music. So I have always been fascinated in helping young people know the best inside them. And then I started my own coaching practice a few years ago, and I work with students and staff and leaders in thinking about what their best possibilities are inside them that they might take for granted.
So before we get too into the hope talk yet, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from?
Absolutely, yes. I grew up in Waco, Nebraska, and my dad was a farmer. I went to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln as an undergrad and studied to be a music teacher. So after I graduated in 1984, I taught in Wilbur-Claytonia School District for a few years, and it was a wonderful place to teach. And then I started at GALLUP in 1987 and spent my whole time there working with nonprofits and schools in not only selection but strengths development. Clifton Strengths became new to the world in the year 2000, so that was really my focus. So it's been a long and really enriching journey about helping people know what it is that they do well. Yeah, I have one daughter. She lives up in Minneapolis. She's a civil engineer with strengths really different than me because that's how our offspring land many times. And my husband Joel and I have lived in Omaha for 32 years. So I love this town, and I just love thinking about all of the people around this town that pour good into the lives of young people to help them land in their best life.
So how did that hope piece come into existence? Where did that idea come from? How was it in the early days, kind of kickstarting this new research and the Hope Index and all of that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. GALLUP had always partnered with the Kappa and Phi Delta Kappa in studying how students thought and felt. And so as we invited in a gentleman named Dr. Shane Lopez, who was quite an architect and authority on hope, hope, we wrapped that into a new survey for students called the GALLUP Student Poll. Now, that was awesome to be a part of. It was really an asset-based instrument. I think at that time we wanted schools to know that, hey, we can measure how students feel about what they can do, knowing that there's lots of surveys. There were many risk behavior surveys, and that's important to know too. But there wasn't really anything in the space of asking students, from 5th grade through 12th grade about who was most positive and hopeful to them about their future. How did they think about their future in a positive way? So it was really exciting to be part of that origin, I think, and the genesis of what now has, become a survey for 6 million students.
Wow.
Asking them about who they are and how can we help them have more hope about their future.
So when you asked those questions and you saw the results, was there anything surprising? Were there, I don't want to say hopeless, but maybe kids who weren't feeling very hopeful about their future that you saw that was surprising or anything like that?
Yeah, I think that, it would oftentimes turn out to be that half were hopeful and half were not. Half were engaged, half were not. They weren't always the same half necessarily. I think we would see differences in it by grade level. Oftentimes that had to do with when we would meet with the administrators in that particular school. Sometimes they would reflect on the educators that were serving those kids, and they would say, oh, yes, probably 6th grade, that's a really hopeful team. They think about positive affect. They think about looking ahead. I think the other fascinating discovery was that many students, by and large, were positive about their future. It was when we asked them more specifically, how will you get there? That's where it fell away. They didn't have as many ways and means to get there. They had positive thoughts and aspirations about what their future wanted to be, what they wanted their future to be like. But that's where we realized that we all had to do a better job of helping young people have the ways and means about that. One thing we found is that, when we think about what we say to students, it could be categorized as either a hope booster or a hope buster. Hailey, if I greet you when you come into school and I call you by the name that you like to be called, that's a hope booster. If the first thing that we say to a student when they walk in a school, if the first question is, have you taken your medication today? That's more of a hope buster. So I think these results as the caring adults in that district and could look and see what did students say, I think it helped them take a closer look at, oh, golly, we might have really good intent about this, but what are the students, feeling and absorbing from how we interact with them?
That's so interesting because you think asking, oh, have you taken your medication today might come from a caring place, but doesn't feel great.
Right,
That's
right.
the first thing you hear when you walk through the door.
Exactly. And, we would have, teams from high schools or middle schools, kind of brainstorm about what might be hope boosters that we could do. What could we say or encourage with students? Some schools did a hope audit where they really looked around at all their signage. And this was one of my favorite ideas, where they would invite in community volunteers. They would maybe ask a couple parents, ask some students, and they would just walk around their school to view what's welcoming, what's positive messaging. In one particular middle school lunchroom, they really revamped it. I mean, they figured out that they had a lot of signs and messaging about what not to do, but they hadn't really emphasized what to do. So rather than, don't make a mess, it was, clean up your lunch table, invite other friends to sit with you. Here's the best practice about doing this. So it does get me to thinking about, in any place, do we help you know the doors that you can come in versus all this signage about where not to come? Could we welcome you to say, come in here? And some of it's just, I think, more overt and more intentional about what to do rather than what not to do.
And how does all those responses, does it boost hope? Have you seen the effects of it work?
Absolutely. Where we got to partner with some schools that really applied great intention about this and then thought about how do they involve their students in goal setting. How a lot about hope science is contingency thinking. So how are we helping students have different ways to get around obstacles? I think one thing Gallup found was that we as adults probably don't talk enough about the obstacles that we have encountered and moved aside on the way to where we are now. So that's an easy strategy. So I think some of this, Hailey, was really illuminating what we might have going on in our heads that we just never told anybody about. And if we're only thinking about it and it's not reaching the airwaves and not reaching students, we can do better about that. When you know better, you do better.
So if a child or maybe a high school or a youth, if they're having, let's say, like home problems that really makes it difficult for them to elevate their hope, what's something for individuals like that who feel stuck, who are feeling not very hopeful and just don't know that next step to do? Maybe they're aware that they feel that way, but they don't really know what to do next.
I think it really has to do with, I think mentorship plays a role. I think every way we can include, initiate relationships with young people and help them know that we are interested in them, that their path might be different than ours, that my mentor, Dr. Shane Lopez, used to say, with young people, how do we create positive memories about the future? And that statement at first is a little jarring, and then it really, I think, just describes how do we help them build possibility thinking. So I think it is a gentle, empathetic, compassionate way to figure out more about what is on the mind of this young person and how can we help, be it being a good listener, a connector of maybe what's something that they hope to do. I'm mindful that sometimes kiddos will share goals and they might say, well, I want to be a professional basketball player. And it's interesting to me that sometimes adults shut that down right away and just say, well, that's not feasible. And I think there's other ways we could figure out more about what is it about that that's really relevant and interesting to that teenager. How can we find out more about that? So rather than just shutting down what we think are not feasible possibilities, I think it's about listening and caring. It starts with caring and then listening and figuring out what steps can help them examine possibilities for the future.
So when you left Gallup or near the end of your time there, how much had you seen the hope science focus grow?
As it began in 2009, I think there was a hunger for it, a need for it. I think that people realize that we can have positive things that we ask kiddos about. I also noticed that through the pandemic, I think it became even more important. I feel like Dr. Lopez's work was ahead of its time in terms of how we pay attention to the voices of young people and help them take their future for a test drive. And so it felt like during the pandemic and after, there were more voices really noticing and thinking about how do we help young people stay hopeful. I think we're still dealing with that. And goals. Dr. Lopez used to ask people, I was with him so much when he would be presenting, and he would ask an audience of 350 people, and he would ask them, who in here has ever washed a rental car? And there'd be at least one person in big crowds that would raise their hand, which made me giggle. But he said, think about how we, frame up goal setting for young people. He said, I wonder if we're asking them to wash a rental car. Are we making sure that goals are fun, that they are in tune with what this person wants to do? I don't think goal setting's easy for any of us. Some of us come by it more naturally, but I think we've got to have this sense of agency about it, this fun about it. I help teach a Hope leadership class through UNO for educators around the state and actually around the country. And so it's been fascinating to, intersect with them as they think about promoting hopeful conversations and goal setting that really is about agency and pathways. And it does help me think about the fact that we haven't always made that very fun. So why would kids want to do it?
Right. That's so interesting. So tell me about this class that you teach. What are some things you go over? So this is for people who want to become teachers?
Actually, it is. It's part of a graduate level opportunity they can have for teachers getting their recertification, or administrators getting other degrees or studying to be principals or superintendents. So it has been really awesome to, I think, put in their hands these tools about hopeful messaging. So one of the assignments is for them to think about a communication that has come out from your organization or school and just scan it to say, how hopeful is this? And many times the students will say, oh gosh, you know what? We were just sharing information. I don't know that I made people excited about this. We know from GALLUP research that if you want to engage your followers, the more hopeful you are about the future, the more engaged people will be. And so with that premise, I think it becomes a way to say, oh gosh, if I have a weekly newsletter for my elementary school staff, how can I include pieces that are hopeful about the future? And so I think it gets them tweaking things ever so slightly to include hopeful nuggets. And it's awesome to, to really know that, well, I'll just say it, in Grand Island Senior High School, every single student and every single staff member knows 5 ways they contribute their talents. And so that's been, I think, eye-opening and illuminating as the kiddos talk about themselves in interviews. I think it's a wonderful way for seniors to think about, how will I share this? I'm embarking on the work with freshmen this week. And so by the time May comes around, one of my favorite questions is, hey, what do you know now about being in high school? And what advice would you give to 8th graders that you didn't know in August when school started? So I think it's this evolution. I mean, humans want to learn and grow. We all do. We might not say that out loud when we get up. It's not what people probably report to their barista. But it really is a way to help each person know ways that they can grow and develop according to who they are. So I guess it feels good to know what I know from a research perspective, and, just being a student, an ongoing student of hope science and positive psychology, to keep learning about that. But I really want to put it in people's hands for tools about their own talent. One of the best tools that you have inside you that's the best multiplier, Hailey, is your talent. And so it's fun to help people know that and then activate on that.
Okay, so you treat the strengths as pathways.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Having it framed up that way is really helpful, I think.
Oh, good. And I think strengths, it personalizes how we boost hope. It doesn't have to be only people with futuristic or positivity that will rah-rah others to a hopeful future. It can be the way that I scrutinize something through an analytical talent. And it might feel like in a meeting, as I'm furrowing my brows and figuring out if this is worthy of our energy, that can also be a hope boosting strategy to make sure that I'm going to think about details if I'm wired with analytical talent that will ensure success. And that's part of hope boosting too. So I think it puts a name to all the different ways we do things. Because other than that, it feels, I think that was the very reason that Don Clifton developed this strengths language, because he wanted to have a language where it was more robust. Because previous to this, it was just easy to say, well, Hailey's like that and I'm not, and we didn't give full breadth and depth to all the different uniquenesses we carry and how much they can contribute.
Is that kind of what you do with a lot of your consulting? Do you go over their strengths and kind of build off of that, or do you have a different method for each person? Or
you know what, I do have a different method for each person because of my individualization, but at the heart of everybody is their Clifton strengths. So today already I coached new administrators, helping them know that, okay, they were a new principal at a school. So I think it was helping them know how they lead best through who they are. How do they, and it always incorporates hope science. How do we keep people inspired? There can be a lot of hope and joy and inspiration at the start of a school year. That might start to wane a bit as we get into it. And then, how do they help others stay hopeful? And I think that, the tricky thing for leaders in any context is, how do I motivate and engage people who are wired really differently than me? So a lot of my coaching is ongoing. So I will coach leaders monthly about what are successes, what are challenges, what's ahead of you on the landscape, and how do we keep helping you do this through who you are, plus your connection. So I love that. And I have such a passion for helping young people know more about who they are. So I'm grateful that I get to do that.
So a big part of putting hope into action, I mean, you've given so many examples, like changing signage, changing the way we speak to each other, or interact with someone as soon as they're up in the morning. But a big thing you mentioned is goal making. And it's difficult to make goals, probably at any age, I would think. What advice would you have for someone who knows they need to make goals, but they don't know where to start?
Right. I think it's figuring out, first of all, what's the time frame that is most palatable to them. So let's say that I am a young person and you could ask me about, what do you want to do in the future? And they don't have any idea. All of this work has really helped me think about what we ask kids. When they're juniors and seniors, we probably should stop asking them, do you know what you want to do? And maybe we change that up to, what are 3 things that you want your future to include? Because that could incorporate a lot of things. I think with goal setting, it can be, maybe it's, hey, what are 3 things you could think about between now and Friday? Sometimes I think we might even want to call it, what are 3 things, or what could we try on? So figure out more about, where does joy and energy come from the time frame? And then let's deal with that accordingly. I would ask, what gives that young person hope? What's a picture of hope to them? What can we find out more about? What do they love? What can they not wait to do again? And then I think that'll help kind of build that goal setting that's in a really relevant, kind of personalized way. Not according to my timetable, but theirs.
That's so interesting. I know I definitely have made that mistake asking like a junior or senior, so do you know where you're going to college? Do you know what you're going to major in? What are you doing? Because we were all faced with that question at some point. It's interesting to think about how that could actually expand your hope, not having a total idea, but opening up to different possibilities and try different things to see what you actually like, instead of just in the box right away.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one thing that we found with Hope for Young People that it was such a predictor of successful outcomes, that it was more of a predictor of whether kiddos would come home or not, or continue with their college after the first semester than perhaps their ACT or SAT score was. And so that was some of the first indications about, wow, how do we help people know this? How do we build it? How do we boost it? It is something that we can do something about. It's an equal opportunity asset. We've never seen that hope is impacted necessarily by socioeconomic or the zip code of where you live. It really is about how do we surround these kiddos with hopeful conversations.
So I love this method of looking ahead, but not too far ahead, and really kind of checking in with yourself, where you're at now. Are you still interested in this? Did you discover while you're trying to work through this goal that this is still something you want to do? I think that's a really smart way of going about it.
Yes, it has worked really well. And sometimes it could be that, if I'm your mentee, you and I might be talking about ideas, and maybe the goal you give me is to talk to someone else at my school about something they love about their job. It can be these really easy, informational, and yet casual questions that are doing something that moves us forward in that way.
I like that too, because I think when I think of goals, you think of something really big. Like, oh, my goal is to get a master's degree. I don't know in what, but I want that to happen. But then kind of shrinking it down, oh, why don't you talk to someone with a degree you're interested in first and then go from there?
Right. Yes. And I think we're getting better about it. We were, as we were really thinking about, how do we change up and augment and enhance career education for kids? And some of it, I think some of our clients and our wonderful partners, would then think about, hey, when you, and our first idea was, when you have someone come and talk about their jobs at a school, make sure they love their job. Don't invite somebody just because they're next door or somebody knows somebody, because young people don't need to hear someone talk about the fact that they're super happy to be away from their workplace and out of that office. And so, we actually had a project where sixth graders in this town were supposed to go interview people that love their job. And they had 3 questions. And the first question was, do you love your job? And if kids could, if their interviewees couldn't say yes, they were like, thank you so much. This concludes our interview. But it was a way I loved how it was highlighting, what do we love about our job? I mean, and I think we could talk about that more. I think that, it's hard for young people sometimes to put themselves into various different kinds of work. And the other reality is that they could be doing work that we don't even realize yet or know what it's called yet. But I think the affect and the joy is also been part of this. That's part of Hope Science too, about what do you love about this and how might you contribute to that?
When you work with someone and they have a goal, they finally have decided on something they want to focus on, is that when you figure out these pathways together to reach the goal, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's figuring out how are they wired to complete it. Sometimes people need little nudges about it, or need little or weekly things, or how am I applying my agency to that? In my own case, like with goals about completing things, I'm going to, work on this next contract or proposal or project. And in my own life, for 62 years, it's worked that I give myself a little treat, or, okay, I really want to, go to Starbucks for a latte or go do this, but I better get this done first. And so I think it is figuring out what means something to each person, and then how do we map it out along that way with celebration too. I think one of my favorite mantras about that was really a a founding principle of GALLUP was that, there is no excellence without celebration. So, and at GALLUP, it was the founders. He would say, let's eat about it. So we always, it was about having food or something nearby to share in that way too. So I think I think an important question would be when we succeed at this, when we meet this goal, how do you want to celebrate about it?
So what happens if you don't meet the goal and maybe you feel a little bad about it, or you don't feel as hopeful about it? What happens with that?
Yeah, I think we then just re-goal and always knowing that's a piece about it. I think that's probably a verb, a noun that we introduced a lot to individuals to say, okay, what does re-goaling look like? And how do we've all done it, but I don't think we talk about it enough. Or I don't think we help young people know that that's an option. It's okay. It is part of, when we think about, hopeful or discouraged or stuck, that discouraged just might be that, oh, Hailey, you need a little nudge and then you'll be more hopeful about this. Or if you're stuck, what do we need to do about helping you, figure out about that? And a lot of times it is re-goaling. It's that it doesn't have to be the end, that there are options. And sometimes if we can't think about those for ourselves, who else can we connect with that will help us know about those? Shane would tell a story, I think this happens a lot, about maybe his own brother, lost a scholarship and, was just maybe, just ever so slightly didn't meet the GPA. Well, he thought he had to drop out of school. I'm not going to get my scholarship. I can't pay for college. And Shane would say, Shane gave him advice to say, hey, call up the scholarship office. Call them, tell them your situation. You're so close. What could they do? And I think, Hailey, there's so many examples about that where it might not be the end or the worst possible thing. Like that if you explain a situation, a problem, an issue, who can help you solve it? There's probably more solutions than when we even imagine. We don't know them, though.
I like that. It's very solutions-based thinking, not just stopping in our tracks and giving up. There's always something else we can figure out or ask for help. I think that's a huge thing, too, is just asking for the help. Do you have a story that you like to look back on about someone you've worked with or maybe an organization you worked with that was in one maybe darker place and ended up with a brighter future in the end?
Yes, actually, here's one of my favorite stories about when we would gather teachers together to share their hope strategies. So this teacher in Arizona, she was working with students in they were well into their senior year. There wasn't that much time left, and they were getting pretty discouraged. And so one day, she just told them they were going for a walk. So she brought them all outside. I remember her talking about the fact that it was warm out because of her climate where she was. But the kiddos obviously were asking her so many questions about, where are we going? Will there be balloons? Will we get something to eat? And she just had them walk a certain number of steps, and then they stopped. Well, she actually had them walk the same number of steps that they had been in high school. And so I don't recall the number, but it was the number of days they had been in school. And so she paused and she told them that. She says, every step we've taken has represented, a day that you've been in school. And so I think they had 25 days left. She goes, we are now going to take the amount of steps for the number of days that we have left. So they did 25 steps. It didn't seem like very much to them at all. And I love that illustration, Hailey, because I think that she pulled the future into the present. I mean, I think that's a function of hope. How do we give kiddos positive memories about the future? And right then, I think she helped them know that they had already accomplished so much, and then they could see it and feel it and know that what was coming up was quite doable related to where they had already come from. So it's one of my favorite illustrations and stories about, how do we just keep making it real and relevant and easy and fun, I think, for us to think about the future and goals.
I like to think of it that way for adults too, keeping it fun. I think is such great, simple advice.
Exactly. And another strategy I might share too is part of HOPE strategy is nexting, NEXTING. And that is putting a spotlight on the next thing that we're looking forward to. So I think it's a great thing to ask. It's how I wrap up my coaching calls. It's how I wrap up conversations with young people I'm mentoring. It is, I think in many schools, it's the exit ticket, or what students answer is they're coming out of the lunchroom or as they're leaving school. And so I think it's such a great way to plant hopeful thoughts about, oh gosh, whatever that is. It might be that I get to have a Lunchable when I get home. Or it could be that we got a new puppy and I get to play with that little dog when I'm home. But I think it's the asking about that. What is the next thing you're looking forward to? I think it's the acceptance about that, the non-judgmental nature that we just then accept what people say and know that. And if I ask you that and I get to see you the next day, then I can ask you about that. So it builds that relationship currency too. So that's another favorite question I like.
I like that question. I feel like that's something you could just journal about too. So it's really easy in case you don't have that person or you're working with yourself. You can just ask yourself, what am I looking forward to next every day? I just thought of this question, but what's something you do every day for your hope?
Oh, that's a great question. I try to journal or jot down like a delight that I have every day. So what I do is I read a lot. I love reading and thinking about hopeful people in my life and getting to be with them. One of my friends, Micah Librant, is a fantastically brilliant coach. So she keeps me hopeful. My freshmen that I get to see every month, they keep me hopeful. So I try to reflect on great moments every day and then look forward to how I can make more of those happen for kids. I think I feel lucky to get to do this work around other people that are really working hard to make young lives better, and that keeps me hopeful.
I love that. So this question might be the same of what you just said a little bit, but something we ask all of our guests and that me and Scott and John will answer every week is, what gives you hope this week?
Oh gosh, what gives me hope this week is knowing that, Hailey, there are people like you right here that are pouring energy into helping young people land in their best life. And that gives me hope.
That is a beautiful answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love that.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you so much for being on Hope Champions podcast.
Thank you. It's been so fun to talk with you all. Then I would just say, everybody that's listening to this, ask someone else in your life the next thing they're looking forward to.
Hailey, thanks so much for having that conversation with JerLene. I first met her in 2009 when my students were part of the first GALLUP student engagement poll. And I remember thinking, who is this powerhouse person that's training us all on this? And I was so overwhelmed by her positive energy and the infectious enthusiasm that she brings to this work. So it's great to visit and share that energy with everybody.
Yeah, I really enjoyed speaking with JerLene. This was my first time meeting her, but as soon as you talk to her, it's like,
you're her best friend.
Yeah, exactly. And
kind of like John Davis.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, I loved our conversation. It was so hard to edit because we talked about so many interesting things, but we only have so much time on the show. Mm-hmm. But one of the things we talked about that she really kind of gave me some inspiration on is mentorship and how important it is, not just for us to seek a mentor, but to mentor others as well when we're in that place in life. And so her and I had a really interesting conversation about maybe I'll always feel like I'm not quite ready to be a mentor, but really, no, you are. Like you always have something to teach someone else. So she was just a very encouraging, wonderful person.
As I listened to the interview, the word that came out, you just used it, is teach, right? What I heard from JerLene over and over again is that hope is something we can teach to people, that we can practice with them, that we can inspire, and that everybody needs it. And to your point about mentorship, everyone can help inspire hope in the life of young people or families.
Yeah, you don't have to have every data point that needs to be talked about. You don't have to be an actual facilitator for trainings and things like that. Just being a good model of hope, of modeling hope, can be very significant. Having that person that maybe that you're not realizing is watching your movements, seeing how you're handling situations or handling circumstances that come up in your life or just on a regular basis. And they see how that is, because just like everyone we already talked about, hope is infectious or contagious. Hope is contagious.
Hope is contagious.
So it's something that just being able to take bits and pieces from each one of these conversations that we have and being able to be a model of that can go very far.
So as we think about our own, what gives us hope this week, I want to give a shout out to JerLene, because as someone who trains a lot in the community, I go to a lot of conferences and talk about hope. And nothing gives me more hope as a presenter than when I look out and see JerLene sitting in the audience. And I always tell her, you might as well come up here, because I'm going to hand you the microphone. I'm going to call you out, right? And when you talk about mentorship, that's very informal mentoring, right? I'm in the audience. At the conference, I'm supposed to be the speaker, but seeing JerLene as an expert that I can call on, I love it when that happens.
Yeah.
So what gives you hope this week, John?
What gives me hope this week is knowing that I don't have to be at my best to inspire others. There's numerous examples where, but one I can think of is I was doing a training, and throughout the whole time, I felt like I was just stumbling over words, may not have got my points across correctly, wasn't resonating with the audience as well. And I just thought, you know what, that was just a bad one.
You were beating yourself up.
I was just, that was not good at all. But then, as I'm gathering my stuff to hurry up and get out of there as fast as I can, someone comes up and talks about how much that meant to them, how the things that I talked about really resonated with them, things that they're going to try later, or things that they've done in the past that they didn't think that was the right action or the best thing to do, but they realize now, hey, that was the right action I should have done. So seeing those things or hearing that from someone, it gave me more hope. It made me realize, you know what, that training may not have been as bad as I thought.
Yeah, you don't always have to be at the very, very, very peak of your game.
That's what gives me hope.
What about you, Hailey?
I think what gives me hope, kind of going along that same idea of just showing up even when you're not feeling great. I've been taking a language class and it's very challenging. I'm taking Hebrew.
I was just about to ask you what language.
Yeah, it's Hebrew, different alphabet, different everything, not a romantic language, which I am much more familiar with. So this class is a way of learning that I'm really not used to. I'm very much like a note taker, especially with languages. I really like the reading and writing part the most. And with this class, it's all like speaking and listening. Speaking and repeating. And if they catch you writing notes, they're like, stop taking notes. Don't look at your notes. They just want you to say it over and over and over again until it's just there. And eventually it just comes naturally and you're not thinking twice about it. And it's so challenging. So the first few classes, I was like, I'm awful at this. I don't know if I can do this. My teacher's just really encouraging. She always tells us, just show up, drink a cup of coffee, because it's in the evening and we're all tired. We're all kind of brain dead. She's like, just do what you got to do to show up. just repeat and it'll like happen eventually, and just don't worry about it. And she was right. Like, the more you just are consistent and you show up, no matter where you're at, you're going to do better. And even on days where you feel like, oh, I don't think I really got it, something in that class is like going to stick with you. That's going to make a difference for the next one.
That's cool.
Yeah. I've really been enjoying it. I'm someone who like needs to be learning all the time. So I really enjoy classes and things like that, even if it has nothing to do with like anything I'm doing professionally or whatever, just a hobby.
That's cool.
I think that story is a perfect place to end this season. What we know about hope in people is that one of the most challenging aspects of it is agency, having that ability to overcome the frustrations and the obstacles that get in the way. And what you just shared is you're having to learn new agency strategies. Mm-hmm. You're having to learn new ways to handle the obstacles and frustrations. And that's the greatest challenge I think that we have in our community to build hope. So I'm glad that you left. We're leaving the season with the challenge to think differently, people, to find new strategies when life throws you something tough. Find new ways, stick with it, persevere, find new ways to handle those challenges. One of the challenges that we will have is finding great speakers to bring you in the next season of the podcast. So if you have great ideas, great questions, great challenges for us, please send them to us.
Yes, you can email us at info@projectharmony.com. So if you have any topic suggestions or any ideas like that you want to share with us, send them our way.
We'll catch you next season.
See you next season.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Hope Champions podcast with Project Harmony. For more information about the podcast or how to become a Hope Champion in your community, visit our website at projectharmony.com/Hope Champions. Listen, rate, and subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Keep up with us and the rest of Project Harmony on social media. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Project Harmony, and on X at Project Harmony 2. Join us for the next episode.